want to hit clips like this?
Spammy is coming through. Quick turn!
Flash.
Oh boy!
Oh my God! What?
But instead, you keep dying the instant you peek. You've probably felt like your aim's fine, your crosshair's there, but you still keep losing the fights. And the worst part, you don't even know why. I'm here to tell you that in some cases, it's not just your aim that's causing these whiffs, but it's subtle movement mistakes that are hard to notice. That's why today, in this video, I'll break down 6 subtle reasons why your movement sucks and how to fix it fast. So get ready to take some notes and let's get into the video. The first reason your movement sucks is that it's too predictable. If your movement pattern during gunfights is pressing AD in between your strafes, you're doing it wrong. I know that AD strafing is an achievement for beginners, and it's a good thing compared to just standing still, but it can quickly become a bad habit. Most players never think about this, but changing direction unpredictably is the next step required to compete in higher lobbies. Instead of tapping AD to counter strafe, try double tapping the same key. For example, AA or DD. It messes with the enemy timing and gives you cleaner, more unpredictable movement. This works at the highest level too. Check out this example from Shilai Gaming versus PaperX. Raga doesn't counter strafe, he hits DD, and even a world-class player like Forsaken is thrown off. The movement was so unexpected, it made the kill basically free. The great thing is that if you adjust your crosshair correctly, changing your strafing pattern doesn't mess with your crosshair placement, and it's a pretty simple mechanic to implement into your gameplay. If you're constantly switching it up between normal counter strafing, using AA and DD, using same directional strafes will force your enemies to constantly think on their feet, which allows you to gain time, get more kills, and win more gunfights. Practicing this is incredibly easy. Hop into a team deathmatch and focus only on changing up your movement pattern, alternating AD with short and longer same directional strafes with AA or DD. It might be easier to start slower and take more time to shoot, but over time it should look more like this. The speed doesn't matter, but just build the habit first. And if after practicing your movement you're still struggling to climb and are not sure what you should work on, my team of a dozen Radiant and VCT coaches can help you find your biggest bottlenecks and fix what's holding you back. On top of that, we guarantee you'll gain 500 RR in 10 weeks, or you get your money back inside the Immortal Roadmap program. We can be so confident in our results because we've helped thousands of players find their bottleneck, fix their gameplay, and reach their dream rank in just a few weeks. So if you're serious about putting in the work with world-class coaches, click the link below to book a free strategy call with me or one of my coaches to see if you'd be a good fit. Now that you started changing up your strafing patterns more often, this next reason might be why you're still dying a lot more than you need to, and it has to do with not moving back into cover properly. If you're slicing the pie but not instantly returning to cover, you're doing it wrong. Slicing the pie means gradually clearing angles little by little in order to clear an area. Peeking with this technique allows us to clear very safely in case we might not know what angle our enemies might be holding from. But when doing so, some players peek out and stop in the open, which makes them very vulnerable to any enemy peeking out unexpectedly. And this can result in them instantly dying and not being sure what even happened. The truth is that stopping in the open defeats the entire point of slicing the pie, which is to clear safely and advance your position. To make slicing the pie more effective, you have to combine it with jiggle peeks. Instead of standing still after peeking out, use lateral movement to clear a small part of the angle and snap back into cover right after. This back and forth rhythm keeps you safe while clearing more and more of the angle. So to practice this, hop into a custom game and choose a site and clear it like this. Press your A or D key to peek out laterally and peek out with your crosshair just slightly out of the angle. After that, slightly move your crosshair into the opposite direction you've peeked while also moving back into cover. The reason you're doing this is to prepare your crosshair for the next peek while also staying safe. Now peek again and clear more of the angle, doing the same thing as before. And after that, you'll keep repeating this process of peeking out slightly more every time and snapping back into cover instantly without stopping in the open. Keep repeating this until you fully clear the area. It might not feel natural at first, so you should start slowly to build rhythm, then speed it up as it gets more natural. And trust me, if you start using this correctly in ranked, you'll stop dying the instant you peek. And speaking of angles, the next subtle reason your movement sucks is because of the way you hold angles. Let's say you're holding an angle on C-Long on Lotus as chamber, then bam, you're dead before you even realize what happened. But although you might think the enemy just has better aim or reaction time than you do, the reason has to do with your movement and how you hold the angle. If you're standing still on a common angle while holding for an enemy to peek you, you're trolling. Standing still just makes you an easier target, and it doesn't help you if you're in a common angle where you'll likely get pre-fired. Instead, if you incorporate what's called micro movements into your gameplay, you can take your angle holding to a higher level. So what are micro movements? They're tiny strafes or AD taps that you make while holding an angle or in between your shots. These tiny strafes make you harder to track and harder to hit. The goal is to break the enemy's usual pre-aiming and timing, which makes it infinitely harder for them to hit you the instant that they peek. This also helps you by adding a layer of unpredictability to your game, and for a split second, causes the enemy's crosshair placement to be wrong and their shot to likely miss. It also counters the peeker's advantage, the concept where due to server latency, the player that peeks out first usually sees the enemy first. But don't just take it from me. Here's an example of Fnatic's Alpha using micro movements while holding the entrance to C site on Lotus. In round 6 of this game, Fnatic have gotten some early picks and has now shifted the round into a 4v2 scenario. Alpha, who's already on a 2k, is holding the entrance to site at an off angle. If you look closely, you can see that while he's holding the angle, he spams A and D to make him an awkward target for Boo and Benji Fishy to hit if they get a chance to peek him. In this scenario, Alpha is able to pick up both the kills and secure round 5 for Fnatic. Now that you've figured out how to hold angles correctly, what about if you're peeking into an angle? That's where assessing an angle comes into play. Ever pushed onto site and felt like you're exposed to 10 different angles at once? That's not just bad luck, it's failure to assess the angle before you peek. What I mean by this is that you need to ask yourself, what kind of angles can the enemies be in? If you have a drone or similar initiator utility, you can easily clear these types of angles. But if you don't, figuring out what to do can be tough. There are 3 types of angles you need to understand. There are common angles, which are the obvious spots where enemies usually stand in, off angles, which are the less expected and more dangerous angles to peek out in and hold from, and finally, roulette angles, which are high-risk spots where you're exposed to multiple angles at once. What I'm trying to say is that you can have the best movement in the world, but if you dry peek a roulette angle, you're gambling your life away. Good movement works well if it's actually thought through, but if you're gambling that an enemy isn't on that angle, the chances of you dying are raised drastically. That's where the 8 method comes in handy. It stands for assess, prepare, and execute. So how do you apply this to your peeks? First, you assess the angle you need to peek by asking yourself what type of angle you're approaching. Is this a common angle, a roulette angle, or an off angle? Next, you need to prepare your crosshair placement and be mentally ready for how you're going to peek that angle. For example, for common angles, you can either do a standard peek with pre-aiming, or you can do a jiggle peek into a wide swing. For off angles, you're probably going to want to slice the pie with jiggle peeks and clear out the angle more safely. And finally, when dealing with roulette angles, the key is to not dry peek. Use your util like flashes, drones, or smokes to isolate some angles and peek out with a teammate to turn this coin flip into a fair fight. And the last step is execute. This is where most players fumble, not because of bad aim, but because they second guess themselves mid-peek. So if you did the preparation correctly, peek like you mean it. Confidence doesn't come in without practice, but it can really boost your reaction time and precision. Now, learning about this 8 method to help your peeks is one step, but what if you're stuck in a tight space and want to peek properly? That's where this next tip comes in. Have you ever peeked out from garage on Haven and felt like your body's scraping against the walls while trying to shoot? That's because tight spaces mess with your movement and aim. Walls in various boxes can restrict your movement, distract you, or block you during a gunfight. And as a response, you might peek diagonally to avoid getting stuck. But swinging at an angle while pressing A and W simultaneously feels clunky, and it makes you appear slower from the enemy's point of view. Peeking diagonally also ruins your counter-strafe timing. So instead of hitting your target, your bullets will end up flying everywhere. If you're fed up with this issue, there's a pretty easy fix. Take for example the hallway from garage to C site on Haven. If an enemy is peeking you from backside, you can't peek from further back as the wall is constricting you. Not only that, the enemy will have an angle advantage since they're further away from the angle. So the fix? Step forward to clear the tight corner, then swing wide using A or D. This allows for clean movement and space to fight back. It's essential to remember that whenever possible, you should always peek in straight angles. Just like with assessing the angle when peeking, you need to assess the angle that you're peeking from and the objects that might block you so that you can adapt your positioning. If a box or wall limits your movement, reposition first, then peek perpendicularly to the enemy's line of sight. To practice this, jump into a custom match and find 3 tight angles where peeking is difficult. Practice assessing the objects around you and approaching the angle more carefully before swinging out laterally using only A or D. But studying up on how to perfectly peek all these tight angles will be useless if in the moment that you peek, you go for a random crouch spray. I know it's something I've talked about before, but it's incredibly crucial. The 6th reason why your movement sucks is because you might actually not be using crouch as often as you should. Even though crouch spraying might not feel good, crouching isn't actually wrong. You've heard people say stop crouching a million times, but pros like Shroud and Primi, they crouch all the time because they know when and how to do it. Primi, for example, uses crouch peeking to the max, and many pros find it impossible to even kill him at times. Benefits that you have with crouch peeking are endless. Crouch peeking forces enemies to flick downward mid-fight, which can throw off their timing and give you a massive advantage. Not only that, using crouch in gunfights is great too, especially in higher ranks where enemies are likely to shoot at head level. Because of this, if on top of changing up your strafing pattern like we mentioned earlier, you're also tapping crouch, you're going to become much harder to predict and hit. To practice crouching properly and crouch peeking, you can go into the range, peek from behind this box, and crouch right before you clear the angle. Make sure to practice this timing until it feels natural. Then hop in a deathmatch and practice on real opponents. You might get destroyed at first, but don't worry. With enough practice, you'll be peeking like Primi in no time. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this guide about aim, and if you're interested in getting more help, check out the link down below. Thanks for watching.